Welcome to Life Stories, where we share heartfelt tales of love, resilience, and the strength of the human spirit. Today's story takes us into the life of Emily, a devoted mother whose world is turned upside down when her 6-month-old son, Jack, mysteriously disappears. What unfolds is a gripping journey of betrayal, courage, and the unwavering bond between a mother and her child. Will Emily uncover the truth and rebuild her life? Join us as we dive into this powerful story of hope and redemption. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. In a quiet neighborhood of Austin, Texas, there was a house everyone admired. It was the kind of place that made passers-by stop and take a second look, a home straight out of a magazine. With tall wrought iron gates, a perfectly manicured lawn, and a driveway so pristine it seemed no car had ever dared to mar its surface. This was the home of Ryan and Emily Miller, a couple who appeared to have it all. Ryan was a tech genius, the sort of man whose ideas could shape the future. His sleek home office was where he spent most of his time, surrounded by glowing screens and the hum of machines. He often said he was working on projects that could change the world. Emily, on the other hand, was an artist in her own right. As a decorator for the wealthy, her work transformed houses into homes, timeless, elegant spaces where people could live their dreams. Her clients revered her, dubbing her the Queen of Style. Together, Ryan and Emily seemed unstoppable. They complemented each other perfectly, Ryan with his innovation and Emily with her creativity. Their home radiated calm and sophistication, as if nothing unpleasant could ever penetrate its walls. And then there was Jack, their baby boy, just 6 months old. Jack was the heart of the house, a chubby little bundle of joy with bright, curious eyes and a laugh that could melt even the hardest of hearts. Emily adored him. She spent most of her days in the nursery, singing lullabies and playing with Jack. His giggles would echo through the house, a reminder of the simple, pure happiness that parenthood could bring. Jack had a special bond with Buddy, their loyal German shepherd. Buddy wasn't just a pet, he was family. Emily often called him Jack's big brother, and in many ways, that's exactly what he was. Whenever Emily took Jack out for a walk in his stroller, Buddy would trot faithfully beside them, his watchful eyes scanning for any sign of danger. He seemed to understand that Jack was special, that this tiny human needed his protection. From the outside looking in, it was easy to envy the Millers. They had everything: success, love, a beautiful home, and a picture-perfect family. Yet, as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. One cool morning, as the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, Emily woke up early, as she always did. It was her routine to check on Jack first thing in the morning, to peek into his crib and see him sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. But that day was different. When Emily entered the nursery, she froze. The crib was empty. For a moment, her mind couldn't process what she was seeing. She stared at the neatly arranged blankets, which were slightly rumpled, as if someone had picked Jack up hastily. Panic surged through her body, and her heart began to race. "Ryan," she screamed, her voice shaking as she ran down the hall. "Ryan. Jack's not in his crib." Ryan stumbled out of their bedroom, rubbing his eyes. "What are you talking about?" he mumbled, his voice groggy. "I said Jack isn't in his crib," Emily repeated, her voice breaking. "He's gone." Ryan's face shifted from confusion to alarm. Without another word, he pushed past her and ran to the nursery. He searched the room, his eyes darting from corner to corner. But there was no sign of Jack. Emily's hands trembled as she grabbed her phone and called their housekeeper. "Auntie Joy, have you seen Jack?" she asked desperately. "Did you take him this morning?" "No," Auntie Joy replied, her voice filled with concern. "I haven't even been to the nursery today." Emily hung up and burst into tears. "Where is my baby?" she wailed, clutching her chest as if her heart might stop beating. Ryan put a hand on her shoulder, trying to steady her. Let's check the CCTV footage, he said, guiding her to the security room. We'll figure this out. Emily could barely breathe as she watched Ryan open the laptop that displayed the surveillance footage. The screen showed images from the cameras placed around the house. Ryan began clicking through the footage from the night before, his fingers trembling on the keyboard. There, Emily shouted, pointing at the screen. The footage showed Buddy pacing nervously outside the nursery door in the early hours of the morning. A few minutes later, the door opened, and Buddy entered the room. Moments later, he emerged, carrying something in his mouth. It was Jack. Emily gasped, her knees threatening to give way. No, 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 she whispered, tears streaming down her face. This can't be happening. Ryan, do something. Buddy has taken Jack. Ryan stared at the screen, his face pale. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. Buddy would never hurt him. He loves Jack. Then where is he taking him? Emily demanded, her voice rising in desperation. Ryan quickly called the security guard at the front gate. Have you seen Buddy this morning? He asked. Yes, sir, the guard replied. I saw him run out of the gate around 4 a.m. I thought you let him out. You thought I let him out? Ryan shouted, his voice filled with anger. Why would I let him take the baby? Why didn't you stop him? I'm sorry, sir, the guard stammered. I didn't know the baby was with him. Emily collapsed onto the couch, her tears falling freely. My baby is out there somewhere, she cried. What if something happens to him? What if he gets hurt? Ryan knelt beside her, wrapping his arms around her shaking shoulders. Nothing will happen to Jack, he said firmly, though his voice betrayed his own fear. We'll find him. I'll call the neighbors and the police. Within minutes, the entire neighborhood was buzzing with the news. People emerged from their houses, some in pajamas, others already dressed for work, offering to help. Buddy was well known in the area, a friendly dog who often accompanied Emily and Jack on their morning walks. No one could believe that he would take the baby and run off. Maybe he's hiding somewhere in the estate, one neighbor suggested. No, another said. Buddy's too smart. He must have gone somewhere on purpose. Emily couldn't bear to hear their guesses. She just wanted her baby back. Please, she begged. Let's just find them. As hours passed, the search expanded. The police arrived, questioning the security guard and the neighbors. Ryan joined the search teams, combing through every corner of the estate. Emily stayed home, glued to the CCTV footage, replaying the images over and over. This doesn't add up, she whispered to herself. Why would Buddy do this? She rewound the footage once more, her eyes fixed on Buddy's calm, deliberate movements. He didn't look scared or panicked. He looked focused, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. What are you up to, Buddy? She muttered, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Buddy's actions on the CCTV footage haunted her. He didn't look like a dog acting on instinct, he looked purposeful, deliberate, as if he were following a plan. But that didn't make sense. Buddy had always been protective of Jack, treating him like a sibling. Why would he take the baby? What was he doing? And more importantly, where had he gone? Ryan returned home just before sunset, his face etched with worry and exhaustion. His shirt was damp with sweat, and there was dirt on his shoes from hours of searching. Emily looked up from the laptop, her eyes red and puffy. Did you find anything? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Ryan shook his head. Nothing, he admitted, slumping onto the couch. We checked the park, the streets, even the alleys. It's like they vanished. Emily clenched her fists. It doesn't make sense, she said, her voice trembling. Buddy wouldn't just run off with Jack for no reason. Ryan sighed. Maybe he got spooked. Maybe something scared him. No, Emily said firmly. Buddy wasn't scared. He was calm. He knew exactly what he was doing. Ryan looked at her, his brow furrowing. What are you saying? I'm saying this wasn't an accident. Emily replied. Someone must have let him out. Someone wanted this to happen. That's ridiculous, Ryan said, rubbing his temples. Buddy's a dog. Emily. He doesn't plot or scheme. Emily glared at him, her chest tightening with frustration. I'm not imagining things. Ryan. There's something off about all of this. And you know what else? She pointed to the screen. There's 5 minutes of footage missing from the gate camera. Someone deleted it. Ryan's face paled. Deleted? Are you sure? Yes. I'm sure. Emily snapped. The footage skips from 3:55 to 4 a.m. Whoever did this didn't want us to see what happened during those 5 minutes. Ryan hesitated, his eyes flickering with something Emily couldn't quite place. Maybe it was just a glitch, he offered weakly. A glitch? Emily repeated, her voice rising. Are you serious? This is our son we're talking about. Ryan, stop making excuses and start acting like you care. Ryan's expression hardened. Of course I care, he said, his voice sharp. Don't you dare accuse me of not caring. Then help me figure this out, Emily shouted. Because right now, it feels like I'm the only one trying to find Jack. The tension between them was unbearable. Ryan finally stood up and walked out of the room, muttering something under his breath. Emily stared after him, her chest heaving with anger and frustration. She didn't know what was going on, but she was beginning to suspect that Ryan knew more than he was letting on. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Buddy carrying Jack out of the house. Her mind raced with questions. Who had deleted the footage? Why had Buddy acted so calmly? And why did Ryan seem so reluctant to dig deeper? The next morning, Emily decided she couldn't rely on Ryan. If she wanted answers, she would have to find them herself. She called a private investigator named Mr. Cooper, a man she had hired once before to look into a legal dispute with a difficult client. He was discreet, thorough, and, most importantly, trustworthy. Mrs. Miller. Mr. Cooper said when he arrived at the house later that day, I understand your son is missing. I'm so sorry. Tell me everything. Emily explained the situation, showing him the CCTV footage and pointing out the missing 5 minutes. Mr. Cooper nodded thoughtfully as he took notes. This is unusual, he said. Dogs don't act this way unless they've been trained to. And the deleted footage suggests someone was involved. I'll need access to your security system and any information you have about who might have had a reason to do this. Emily hesitated for a moment, then decided to tell him about her growing suspicions of Ryan. I think my husband is hiding something, she admitted. He's been acting strange since this happened. And, her voice caught in her throat. And he used to have a close relationship with a woman named Sarah Blake. I think she might be involved. Mr. Cooper raised an eyebrow. Sarah Blake, he asked. Who is she? She's someone from Ryan's past. Emily explained. They were together before we got married. I don't know much about her, but something about this feels connected. Mr. Cooper nodded. I'll look into it, he said. In the meantime, try to stay calm. I'll find out what's going on. Emily nodded. Though staying calm felt impossible. Her entire world was unraveling, and she couldn't trust the one person who was supposed to be her partner. All she could do was hope that Mr. Cooper would uncover the truth. The hours dragged on as Emily waited for updates. She spent most of the day in Jack's nursery, touching his clothes and holding his favorite blanket. The emptiness of the crib was a physical ache in her chest. She tried to stay strong, but the fear of losing Jack forever threatened to consume her. Finally, just before sunset, her phone buzzed. It was Mr. Cooper. Mrs. Miller, he said, his voice calm but urgent. I've been digging into your husband's connections, and I've found something you need to know. What is it? Emily asked, gripping the phone tightly. Ryan has been in contact with Sarah Blake, Mr. Cooper said. They've spoken several times in the past week, and 2 days before your son went missing. They met in person. Emily felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Why would he meet her? She whispered. I don't know yet. Mr. Cooper replied. But I'm going to find out. In the meantime, be careful. There's more to this than meets the eye. Emily hung up the phone, her mind spinning. Ryan had lied to her. He had been meeting with Sarah behind her back. And now Jack was missing. Her heart filled with a mix of anger and despair. She didn't know what Ryan was hiding. But she was determined to uncover the truth even if it shattered their family forever. Emily stared out the window as the sun dipped below the horizon. Her mind clouded with fear and uncertainty. Mr. Cooper's words echoed in her ears. Ryan has been in contact with Sarah Blake. The woman she barely knew but had always felt uneasy about now loomed large in her thoughts. Why would Ryan, the man she had built her life with, keep something so significant from her? And worse, how could he do it at a time like this, when their son was missing? Ryan came home late that evening, his shoulders slumped, and his expression weary. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. But Emily couldn't find it in herself to feel sympathy. Anger simmered just beneath the surface. Her heart a battlefield between suspicion and the lingering love she still felt for him. Anything new? He asked as he kicked off his shoes by the door. His tone cautious, almost hesitant. Emily's lips tightened. She had been waiting for this moment, rehearsing what she would say. But now that it was here, the words stuck in her throat. Finally, she managed. Why didn't you tell me you've been talking to Sarah Blake? Ryan froze, his hand still on the doorframe. What are you talking about? He asked, though his voice lacked the genuine confusion she would have hoped for. Don't play dumb, Ryan, she said, her voice shaking. I know you've been in contact with her. I know you met her 2 days before Jack went missing. He stared at her, his face betraying a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, or fear. Emily, it's not what you think. Then tell me what it is, she shot back, her anger finally boiling over. Because right now, it looks like you've been lying to me, and I can't help but wonder if Sarah has something to do with Jack's disappearance. Ryan stepped toward her, his hands raised as if to calm her down. It's not like that, he insisted. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to upset you. Emily laughed bitterly. Upset me? Ryan, our son is missing. Do you really think keeping secrets is going to make this easier? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine, he said finally. I reached out to Sarah because I needed answers. Answers about what? Emily demanded. Ryan hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. About Jack, he said quietly. About whether he's really our son. Emily's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she thought she hadn't heard him correctly. What? She whispered. Ryan looked up, his eyes filled with something Emily could only describe as torment. When Jack was born, he said, I couldn't help but notice how much he looked like the baby Sarah and I lost all those years ago. It was uncanny. Emily. The same eyes. The same smile. I tried to ignore it. But the thought wouldn't go away. Emily stared at him, her mind racing. So you went behind my back to talk to her? I had to, Ryan said, his voice breaking. I had to know if it was possible, if maybe, somehow, the baby we thought we lost was still alive and, he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Emily felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. She clutched the back of the couch for support, her legs trembling. How could you even think that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack is my son, Ryan. I carried him. I gave birth to him. How dare you question that? I'm not questioning you, Ryan said, his tone desperate. But you have to understand. No, Emily interrupted, her voice rising. I don't have to understand anything. What I have to do is find my son. And right now, I can't trust you to help me. Ryan's face fell. Emily, please. Don't, she said, cutting him off. Don't say another word. She turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the living room, looking as though he had been struck. She didn't want to hear his excuses. She didn't want to see his guilt. All she wanted was to get her son back. And if Ryan was too consumed by his own doubts to help, then she would do it alone. That night, Emily barely slept. Her thoughts were consumed by Ryan's confession and what it meant for their family. She replayed every moment of the past few months in her mind, searching for signs she might have missed, clues that Ryan was hiding something. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't reconcile the man she loved with the man who had doubted their son's place in their lives. The next morning, Emily woke with a new sense of determination. She called Mr. Cooper and told him everything Ryan had confessed. "I don't know if Sarah has anything to do with Jack's disappearance," she said. "But I need to know the truth." "I understand," Mr. Cooper replied. "I'll dig deeper into Sarah's background. If there's any connection to what's happened, I'll find it." As she hung up the phone, Emily felt a small flicker of hope. She didn't know where the investigation would lead, but she was certain of one thing: she would stop at nothing to bring Jack home. Whatever secrets Ryan had kept, whatever role Sarah might have played, none of it mattered as much as her son. Jack was hers, and she wasn't going to let anyone take him away from her. The following days were a blur of worry and determination. Emily couldn't rest. Every moment that passed felt like another piece of Jack slipping further away. She had thrown herself entirely into Mr. Cooper's investigation, combing through every update he sent her and desperately searching for a lead that could bring her closer to her son. It was during one of those restless evenings that her phone buzzed. She grabbed it immediately, her heart pounding. "Mrs. Miller." Mr. Cooper's calm voice came through. "I've found something." Emily's grip on the phone tightened. "What is it?" "I tracked Sarah Blake's movements over the past week," he said. "She's been meeting with a man named Eric Johnson. He's got a record, a long one. Smuggling, fraud, you name it. He's not the kind of person you'd associate with a child's safety." Emily's blood ran cold. Why would she be meeting with someone like that? "I don't know yet," Mr. Cooper replied. "But I followed their trail. They've been seen near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Austin. It's suspicious, to say the least." "Do you think Jack is there?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with hope and fear. "It's possible," Mr. Cooper said. "But I have to warn you, Mrs. Miller. If they are involved, this could be dangerous. You should let the authorities handle it." Emily shook her head. Even though he couldn't see her, "I can't wait," she said firmly. "Jack is my son. I need to see for myself." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Mr. Cooper sighed. "All right," he said. "I'll send you the location. But please, be careful." As soon as she hung up, Emily grabbed her keys and headed for the door. She didn't tell Ryan where she was going. He had already betrayed her trust once, and she couldn't risk him complicating things further. This was something she had to do on her own. The drive to the warehouse felt like an eternity. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. She tried to focus on the road, but her hands shook on the steering wheel, and her chest felt tight with anxiety. When she finally arrived, she parked her car a safe distance away and approached on foot, her heart pounding with every step. The warehouse was a decaying structure, its windows shattered and its walls covered in graffiti. It looked abandoned, but Emily could hear faint voices coming from inside. She crept closer, careful not to make a sound, and peeked through a crack in the door. Inside, she saw Sarah pacing back and forth, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Eric stood nearby, leaning casually against a stack of crates, his expression cold and detached. Emily strained to hear their conversation. "This has gone too far," Sarah was saying, her voice tense. "We can't keep the baby here. It's not right." Eric let out a bitter laugh. "You wanted to play this game, Sarah. Don't back out now. I just wanted to know the truth." Sarah snapped. "I didn't sign up for this. He's innocent." "Eric. He's just a baby." "Innocent?" Eric sneered. Nobody's innocent. Not you. Not me. And definitely not that kid's family. So spare me your conscience. Emily's heart raced. She couldn't stay hidden any longer. Summoning every ounce of courage she had, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Where is my son?" she demanded, her voice echoing through the empty space. Sarah and Eric spun around, their faces filled with shock. For a moment, no one moved. Then Eric smirked. Well, he said. "The mother finally shows up. How brave." "Don't play games with me," Emily snapped, taking a step closer. "I know you have him. I heard everything." Eric's smirk widened. "And what are you going to do about it? You're alone. Lady, this isn't your playground." Ignoring him, Emily turned to Sarah. "You said he's innocent," she said, her voice trembling. "If you really believe that, then help me. Tell me where Jack is." Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting between Emily and Eric. I can't," she stammered. "Yes, you can," Emily insisted. "You know this is wrong. He's just a baby. Sarah, please." For a moment, Sarah looked as if she might break. But Eric stepped forward, his expression hard. "Don't listen to her," he growled. "She's just trying to manipulate you." "No, I'm not," Emily said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I'm a mother. I just want my child back." Sarah took a shaky breath, her resolve wavering. Finally, she stepped back. "I can't do this anymore," she said quietly. "Take him and go." "What are you doing?" Eric snarled, lunging toward her. But before he could reach her, a low growl echoed through the warehouse. Buddy burst into the room, his teeth bared and his eyes locked on Eric. The German shepherd positioned himself between Emily and the man, his protective instincts kicking into overdrive. Emily's heart leapt with relief. "Buddy," she cried. Eric stumbled back, cursing under his breath. "Where did that dog come from?" he muttered. Emily didn't wait for an answer. She turned to Sarah. "Where is Jack?" Sarah pointed to a small room at the back of the warehouse. "He's in there," she said. Without hesitation, Emily ran to the room and threw open the door. There, lying on a makeshift bed, was Jack. He looked so small, so fragile. But he was unharmed. Tears streamed down her face as she scooped him up, holding him close. "It's okay, baby," she whispered. "Mommy's here." Behind her, Buddy growled again, keeping Eric at bay. Sarah stepped forward, her hands shaking. "Take him and go," she said. "I'll handle Eric." Emily hesitated for a moment, torn between gratitude and fear. "What about you?" she asked. "Don't worry about me," Sarah said. "Just go." Emily nodded. Clutching Jack tightly, she backed out of the room, Buddy following close behind. As she stepped outside, she heard Eric shouting, but she didn't look back. All that mattered was that she had her son. The relief of holding Jack in her arms again was overwhelming. Emily kissed his forehead and whispered soothing words as she strapped him into his car seat. Buddy hopped into the back, still watchful and alert, as if he understood his job wasn't done yet. Emily drove away from the warehouse as fast as she dared, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Her mind was spinning, a mix of gratitude for Sarah's last-minute help and fury at the circumstances that had led to this nightmare. When Emily arrived home, Ryan was waiting on the porch, pacing back and forth. The moment he saw her pull into the driveway, his face lit up with a mixture of relief and disbelief. He ran to the car as she stepped out, clutching Jack protectively. "Jack!" Ryan exclaimed, reaching for his son. Emily stepped back instinctively, her body shielding Jack from him. "He's fine," she said, her voice cold. "But don't think for a second that this is over." Ryan froze, his expression shifting from joy to confusion. "What are you talking about?" he asked. Emily ignored him and carried Jack inside, heading straight for the nursery. She laid him down in his crib and stroked his tiny hand. tears streaming down her face. For a few moments, she allowed herself to feel the pure, unfiltered relief of having him back. But that peace was short-lived. The questions swirling in her mind wouldn't let her rest. When she turned to find Ryan standing in the doorway, she squared her shoulders and faced him head-on. "You knew," she said, her voice trembling with controlled rage. "You knew Sarah was involved, didn't you?" Ryan looked taken aback. "What? No, Emily. I didn't." "Don't lie to me," she snapped, cutting him off. "I went to that warehouse. Ryan. I saw her. She's been working with some criminal named Eric. And Jack was there because of them. You've been in contact with her all along. You knew something wasn't right." Ryan took a step closer, his hands raised as if to placate her. "Emily. I swear. I didn't know anything about this. Yes. I talked to Sarah. But it was only because I needed answers about Jack. I never thought she'd." "Stop." Emily interrupted. "Just stop. Do you have any idea what I've been through? What Jack has been through? And all the while, you've been hiding things from me, keeping secrets like it was nothing. How am I supposed to believe anything you say?" Ryan's face crumpled with guilt. "I made mistakes," he admitted. "But I would never do anything to hurt Jack. I love him. Emily. I love both of you." Emily shook her head. Her eyes filled with tears. "If you really loved us, you would have trusted me. Instead, you let your doubts and your past with Sarah destroy everything." Ryan was silent for a moment, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I didn't think it would come to this," he said softly. "I thought I was protecting our family." Emily laughed bitterly. "Protecting us? By dragging Sarah into our lives? By doubting that Jack is your son? You didn't protect us, Ryan. You betrayed us." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Ryan looked like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't find the words. Instead, he nodded slowly. "You're right," he said finally. "I messed up. I don't know how to fix this, Emily. But I want to try." Emily crossed her arms, her resolve hardening. "I don't think you can fix it," she said. "Right now. I need to focus on Jack. He's the only thing that matters." Ryan's shoulders slumped. And for the first time, Emily saw the full extent of his regret. But it didn't matter. The damage had been done, and she couldn't see a way to rebuild the trust he had shattered. Later that evening, as Emily rocked Jack to sleep, her phone buzzed on the table. It was Mr. Cooper. She stepped out of the nursery and answered quickly. "Did you find something?" she asked. "Yes," Mr. Cooper said. "I've been reviewing the records we pulled from the warehouse. And there's something you need to know. Eric hinted during his arrest that someone close to you might have been involved in this." Emily's heart sank. "What do you mean? Close to me? I'm not entirely sure yet," Mr. Cooper admitted. "But Eric mentioned that he had a contact feeding him information, someone who knew your routines and had access to your home." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "You think it's Ryan?" "I don't want to speculate without evidence," Mr. Cooper said. "But I thought you should be aware." "Thank you," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. She hung up the phone and stared at the screen, her mind racing. Could Ryan really have been involved? She didn't want to believe it. But after everything that had happened, she couldn't ignore the possibility. When she confronted Ryan later that night, he denied it vehemently. "Emily, I would never do something like that," he said, his voice breaking. "You have to believe me." But Emily couldn't. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they were growing roots that wrapped tightly around her heart. Until she had answers, she couldn't trust anyone, not even the man she had once thought she'd spend her life with. As she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, Emily vowed to uncover the truth. Whatever it took, she would protect Jack. And if Ryan or anyone else had played a part in this, they would face the consequences. The days following Jack's return were filled with a tense, heavy silence in the Miller household. Emily barely spoke to Ryan. And when she did, Her words were clipped and formal, focused solely on Jack's needs. She spent hours watching over her son, as if the mere act of keeping him in sight could erase the trauma of what had happened. But no amount of lullabies or quiet moments could calm the storm brewing inside her. Ryan, too, was a shadow of himself. He hovered at the edges of Emily's world, trying to reach her. But each attempt was met with cold indifference. He had betrayed her trust. And no matter how many apologies he offered, Emily couldn't find it in her heart to forgive him, not yet. Maybe not ever. One morning, as Emily was feeding Jack in the nursery, her phone buzzed on the table. She hesitated before answering, her heart racing as she saw Mr. Cooper's name on the screen. "What is it?" she asked, bracing herself for more bad news. "I've uncovered something important," Mr. Cooper said. "We've found a paper trail linking Eric Johnson to someone in your inner circle." Emily's breath caught. "Who?" she demanded. There was a pause on the other end before Mr. Cooper replied. "Auntie Joy." For a moment, Emily couldn't speak. Auntie Joy had been their housekeeper for years. A woman she had trusted implicitly. She had been there for Jack's birth, had cared for their home, and had felt like part of the family. "Are you sure?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "I wouldn't bring this to you unless I was certain," Mr. Cooper said. "We found evidence that she was providing Eric with information about your routines, your schedule, and even your security system. I believe she was the one who deleted the CCTV footage." Emily felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her. She hung up the phone and sat in stunned silence, her mind racing. How could Auntie Joy, someone she had trusted with her child, betray her like this? What could possibly have motivated her to do such a thing? Determined to confront her, Emily found Auntie Joy in the kitchen, preparing lunch as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk," Emily said, her voice cold and steady. Auntie Joy turned, her face a mask of concern. "Of course. Is something wrong?" Emily's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "How long have you been working with Eric Johnson?" For a split second, Auntie Joy's expression flickered, shock, guilt, fear, but she quickly recovered, her face settling into a calm mask. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice steady. "Don't lie to me," Emily snapped. "I know you've been feeding him information. I know you're the reason Jack was taken." Auntie Joy's shoulders slumped, and she looked away, unable to meet Emily's gaze. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said softly. I needed the money." Emily felt a surge of anger and disbelief. "Money? You put my son in danger for money?" "I didn't think he'd hurt the baby," Auntie Joy said, her voice trembling. "He said it was just a way to get back at your husband. I didn't know it would go this far." Emily's chest tightened as the pieces fell into place. "What do you mean? Get back at my husband?" Auntie Joy hesitated, then sighed. "Eric said your husband owed him something. He never told me what. But he wanted to send a message. I didn't know Jack would be involved. I swear. I didn't know." Emily's mind reeled. She turned and left the kitchen without another word, her emotions too raw to process. She called Mr. Cooper and informed him of Auntie Joy's confession, ensuring she would face legal consequences. But even as she hung up, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, more that Ryan wasn't telling her. That evening, she confronted him. "Eric had a grudge against you," she said, her tone sharp. "What aren't you telling me?" "Ryan?" Ryan's face went pale. "Emily, don't lie to me," she interrupted. "Auntie Joy already confessed. Eric targeted us because of you. So tell me the truth. What did you do?" Ryan sank into a chair, his hands trembling. "It was years ago," he said quietly. "Before we got married. I invested in one of Eric's businesses, a tech startup. It failed. And he lost a lot of money. I thought it was over. But I guess he never let it go." Emily stared at him, her anger boiling over. You let your past mistakes put our family in danger. You kept this from me while Jack was out there, missing. I didn't think it was connected, Ryan said, his voice breaking. I didn't think he'd go this far. Well, he did, Emily snapped. And because of you, I almost lost my son. Ryan stood, reaching for her, but she stepped back. Her eyes filled with pain. I can't do this anymore. Ryan, she said. You've lied to me, betrayed me, and put Jack in harm's way. I need you to leave. Ryan's face crumpled. But he didn't argue. He packed his things and left that night. His head hung low with regret. As Emily stood by the window, watching his car disappear down the street, she felt a mix of relief and sorrow. She had loved Ryan. But love wasn't enough anymore. Jack was her priority, and she would do whatever it took to protect him. In the days that followed, Emily focused on rebuilding her life. She hired new staff, strengthened the security around her home, and sought therapy to help her process everything that had happened. Most importantly, she poured her energy into Jack, vowing to give him the safe, loving upbringing he deserved. Though the scars of the ordeal would take time to heal, Emily knew one thing for certain: she had fought for her son. And she had won. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them head-on. Jack was her world, and nothing would ever threaten that again. Emily sat on the porch, watching Jack play in the yard with Buddy by his side. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over their home. Life wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was moving forward. She had learned to embrace the small victories. The laughter of Ryan still visited regularly, and while they weren't back to being the family they once were, there was hope. Healing, she realized, was not a straight path but a series of steps taken one day at a time. As she sipped her tea, she whispered, "We've been through the storm, but we're still here." Jack's laughter echoed, a reminder of resilience, love, and the power of second chances. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories for more heartfelt tales of strength and redemption.